So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Monday morning session about throwing office parties, which may not be exactly what you're thinking about on a Monday morning, but we thought as it's something that people are thinking about, probably already have planned, it's a good time to have a good discussion about this and kind of share thoughts and concerns and questions and any other things that you want to talk about around this subject. There will be a little checklist. We have a PDF checklist that we'll add to the chat towards the end of the session, and we'll send it to you all afterwards as well. And we are recording the session as well, so we can send that recording to you as well if you want to share it with any colleagues and have further discussions about it. So, to get started, I'm Mo Cangela, co-creator of Watch This Space, and we are a diversity and inclusion company. And we've been working closely with enlightenHR for about a year, haven't we? I think it's over the last year.
Yeah.
So I'll let Holly introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody who doesn't know me. My name's Holly Mapstone. I'm the Senior HR Business Partner for enlightenHR and enjoy helping people and their businesses grow and thrive. So I love all the work that Mo and the team do at Watch This Space. I think it's very important that we are aligned on sort of legal practices and also sort of diversity and inclusion is a really hot topic. So yeah, really pleased that Mo is sort of co-hosting with me today.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, and we've been working closely with enlightenHR over the last year or so because with a lot of the things that we work on at Watch This Space around diversity and inclusion, there's a strong crossover where we need to consult HR experts to help us with some of the discussions and issues around it. So we thought we'd have this session about office socials and socializing with colleagues because at this time of year, it's something that's a big topic of conversation and lots of employers are thinking about what to do. And there's lots of pitfalls around it and things to think about. So that's why we thought this would be a good subject to focus on. So to get us started, why do we throw office socials at all? Why do we not bother? So some of the reasons that employers do think about this is, first of all, teamwork. So to get people talking together, socializing together outside of the everyday work. It's one of the strong reasons why lots of employers, not just at this time of year, but at lots of times during the year, want to bring people together in more informal settings to ensure and enhance collaboration and teamwork. There's also a strong sense of belonging that's thought about around this. So employers think that by bringing people together, you help people to feel part of the organization and feel that they're celebrating with you together, or they're really part of it, and that the employer cares about them too, that they're being thought about as people who belong to the organization. So that's another reason why sometimes employers throw office socials. It can also be to celebrate successes. So we see that with lots of companies where perhaps there's a contract win or something great has happened to the company, or something great's happened with a team. So different things like that could be other reasons why there could be an office social to bring people together to celebrate something that's brilliant that's happened to the company or to particular people. It is also around holidays. So that's why we picked this topic for this time of year, because a lot of employers are thinking about Christmas parties. So it is also about that too. So that it's not just at Christmas. There are other holidays that employers might decide to say, we're going to have a celebration around that. It's a time of year that people are celebrating something. So we're going to bring people together and put some budget behind it and have a celebration around this subject. And there can be lots of different holidays that are thought about. Not just at Christmas, it could be a summer barbecue or other things like that are thought about to say, okay, it's a holiday time, so we're going to have some sort of social event to bring people together. And it's about giving back to employees. So a lot of employers really think about this and spend a lot of time thinking about what they're going to do, because they want to show employees that they're giving back. They're giving something to employees. They're putting some budget behind it. They're putting some time behind this. And for a lot of organizations, they really value the fact that senior leaders join this type of thing and celebrate with employees and are there for social events with employees. So that's just some of the reasons why employers might throw office socials, and we can have a discussion around other ideas that you have too, because there may be other things that you do in your organization, which is why you have these office socials. But those are just some of the things that come to mind when we think about office socials. Types of socials. So there's a lot to unpick here and the types of socials you might have. So as in the photo there with 10-pin bowling, you might decide to have an activity. And you might say, okay, we're all going to go 10-pin bowling, or we're all going to go skydiving, or we're all going to go go-karting. It could be an activity that's decided that that's the social that's going to happen. And it can be a great, sorry.
I was going to say, Mo, with that one, I'm sure there's always occasions where you get that one person that likes to moan about the activity, and that's what sort of happened in my old office. You'd pick what you thought would be a fun activity like bowling, and there would be someone that really detests it or something. Yeah, exactly.
And with those activities, you're never going to please everybody. That's the thing. There's always going to be some people that don't like the particular activity. And actually, I've got a story to share about that. I joined a team many years ago, joined a sales team. They'd never had a woman in the sales team. I was the first one to join. They decided on, I think, my second week that the social activity was going to be one of those go ape high ropes things. And
that would be my worst.
I was absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
And I was like, there is no way I'm doing that. And they were insistent that I had to do it. And it was awful. But that's a story for another day. So activities can be challenging to think about things that people are going to enjoy and genuinely want to be part of. And we'll come on to choices, because actually not everyone has to join these things either. They should be made optional so that people can feel like they have a choice. So activities are definitely one of the types of socials that you could have. Probably what we see more commonly are things like dinners and lunches. So that could be a lunch in the office. It could be that people are going out. It could be something for the whole company, if you're depending on the size of organisation and your budget. It could be that certain teams go out for a dinner or a lunch or are given a budget. So there's lots of different ways that can happen, but we see that quite commonly, that food is often involved in sort of socials that happen. Next one on the list, sometimes goes in combination with the dinners and lunches, is drinks. Full of pitfalls, and we'll come on to that. But we do see that drinks are often the social event that's chosen. And those of us that have been in workplaces a long time may have experienced all sorts of things on office drinks that can happen, depending on what parameters are set, what kind of team you're in, what kind of organization. So there's lots of different ways in which drinks often feature as the social event, and we'll come on to some of the pitfalls in a little while. Other things we see are things like volunteering. We see that more often, actually. So I live in Brighton. Quite a lot of companies here do things like a beach clean together. So there might be that kind of volunteering, or it could be a charity that's chosen as the year for the charity to support, and people get involved in that and they do fundraising around it. And it's quite a good way to bring people together to do something that isn't their job, but it's bringing people together in a sort of social purpose. And a lot of employers are increasingly looking at volunteering as a way to bring teams together to do something different. And there are employers that give employees volunteering days as well. They say you can do this during a day, and that's fine. We allow people to do that because it's part of bringing people together to do something different, and it contributes to society as well. So we see that happening quite a lot. And then there can be sort of experiences, things like tea tasting or chocolate making or cookery, or there's all kinds of different experiences that you can bring people together to do. So we see that as well. There's lots of companies that spring up, you've probably seen them, that offer all kinds of different activities. Quite a lot of things around cooking, but it could be painting. There's one called something Picasso and pottery down here, where you can sort of draw and make pottery. There's all sorts of different activities that are sort of different to the kind of 10-pin bowling, go-karting type of thing, and they're more about bringing people together for a different type of experience. So we see those too.
I was going to say, I did once I kind of links in with drinks, I guess, but they kind of hosted a sort of cocktail making experience where you could each go behind the bar, and actually that was quite fun. I'm not a big drinker myself, but actually just going behind the bar and learning all the tricks is good. But then it goes hand in hand with the
the pitfalls that we'll come on to.
A couple of pitfalls. So interesting.
But I've done a cocktails one too, and that's quite cool.
Yeah.
So some of the reasons, again, we've touched on this on the earlier slide, but just some of the reasons that you might bring people together are things like festivals. So that in that I include Christmas. But there are lots of other festivals that people celebrate around the year that are not necessarily the ones that you celebrate or that are talked about. So there are lots of different types of festivals that are celebrated every year. So Christmas is the one that everyone talks about. But did you know that Diwali was very recently, and the one that I celebrate, Durga Puja, was in October? And so you may have employees celebrating very different things, Eid, and lots of different celebrations. So they're not necessarily all about Christmas, but there are lots of different types of festivals that people celebrate. There are seasonal things that people celebrate. So you'll often see things like a summer barbecue or a, Easter something or other. So you see it around seasons too. It could be wins. So when there are company wins of a big contract or something like that, it might be that that's where you have the social event. They can just be regular kind of monthly or weekly social things that companies do together. We see that quite a lot too, that there just is something that happens once a month. Sometimes people talk about those things and say we have weekly socials or we have monthly lunch, something like that. So those sorts of things too. And then within teams, there could be team meetings where actually some of those team meetings are about doing something social together. That's some of the sort of reasons why you might have social events and sort of bring people together. What we're going to look at next is what can go wrong. So I'm sure Alison and Holly will have stories to share here too. So what can go wrong? Well, there's a whole load of things that can go wrong. The first one on my list is exclusionary behaviour. You can see all sorts of things going on at social events because somehow people feel like the boundaries are different because it's a social event, often linked with alcohol, not always, doesn't have to be. So you can see bullying, kind of people thinking they can say different things, sort of crossing the lines of what you'd expect to see in the workplace because it's a social event. You can definitely see bullying going on. I've seen that lots at social events where something that may have been under control in the workplace, once it's at a social event, people feel like the boundaries are different and things start to go wrong. Harassment, huge topic that you see go on, and you'll probably see lots of things on social media about this, people who have been harassed at work social events, because again, somehow people feel like the boundaries are different when you're at a social event rather than in the workplace. And it could be something that's already going on in the workplace and it just gets highlighted more because you're at the work social event. There's lots of stories and things you can read around that and stats you can read around that about what happens at work social events. Then there's embarrassment. So certainly when I was younger, it kind of used to be a thing that people used to say, oh, remember what happened on Friday night? And it was, somebody had done something hilarious or embarrassing or, and it was sort of talked about. And I remember when I worked in an international company, when we went to the US office or the US office came over, they were actually quite surprised at how normalized talking about drunken stories was because they didn't do it so much in their workplace, probably were more worried about sort of legal issues, whereas in the UK office it was just talked about all the time. Oh, so and so did such and such, and it was just talked about. And so there can be lots of things like that that go on that cause huge embarrassment for people and could impact them in the workplace too, because something could happen at a social event. And we can talk when we come on to Holly's section about sort of the responsibilities of employers around this. So embarrassment is a huge one. And there can be accidents. So again, I've heard lots of stories about broken legs and somebody fell over and all sorts of different accidents that happen at social events. So where things can go wrong, not just when there's one of those activities, actually when there's alcohol involved, all sorts of things can happen at these social events. So there's probably things that you've seen happen at events that you've been at. So things can go badly wrong.
I was going to say with the exclusionary behavior one, it's interesting because quite often my observation when I was based within an office, especially leading up to particularly the Christmas party, is there would be siloed cultures and there would be maybe particular WhatsApp groups. Actually on the face of it quite harmless, maybe the younger generation of women talking about their outfits or where they're going to go after they go for drinks, etc. But if certain people aren't included in those WhatsApp groups or those team chats, who decides who's in what group, it can actually almost create a bigger divide. And when you think about that the reasoning at the start around, trying to create a belonging and celebrate success and team building, actually it only takes one of those small sort of things to happen, and then people start actually feeling completely the opposite of what you were trying to achieve. So yeah, that's something I would say I've definitely witnessed, and someone's asked me, well, WhatsApp is my personal phone, I can choose who I want to speak to. But I guess if it's associated with a work event and then you're choosing to exclude maybe your colleagues, or, it's not just an open discussion, then where's the line in terms of excluding them and giving them the option to opt out? I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it leads to that bullying and actually the embarrassment as well. So things
Yeah,
get shared, photos get shared on WhatsApp, and are they,
yeah.
if you don't know what's being shared. So there's all sorts of things that can go wrong with that. A few other things that can go wrong. So people can feel excluded. If a particular, if there's a very physical activity organised for every work event, that could lead some people to feel excluded from it, say, well, they don't care about including me in that event, for example. If it's always around alcohol, there could be people that say, well, I feel like I'm not welcomed at these things, for example. There's different religious beliefs, so everyone doesn't celebrate Christmas. Some people may not celebrate it, but they're okay with it, and it, pretty indifferent towards it. But there are many other religions that people believe in too. I think it was this time last year, actually, the census data came out, which showed that less than half of the country actually declare themselves as Christian. So there are many other religions. Some people aren't religious at all, so there's a lot of things to consider around that. There's physical ability differences. So that example that I gave you of the go ape climbing the trees, they didn't once check whether, I would be able to do that, or forget whether I wanted to do it. They didn't even ask me if I felt physically able to do it. And then, the point about whether I wanted to do it, that wasn't considered either. So there's differences that people have that we need to think about when it comes to what we're saying is fun for everybody, and think about how people are included in these things. Accessibility in lots of different ways. So accessibility to venues, accessibility to digital things. There's a lot of things to consider around accessibility, and actually, do we ask people? So do we consider that when we're organising events? And then there's times of day. So there's a lot of parents that complain about this with a lot of different events, that everything's in the evening. And so if you have children, you may not always have childcare to be able to join these things. And actually, not just parents as well. There are lots of other people that have other responsibilities or other desires. Maybe they don't want to spend their evening, and perhaps they prefer something at a different time of day. So there's quite a few things to think about there around organising social events. And crucially, some people prefer not to socialise with their colleagues outside of work, and that's totally fine. The days of saying like you have to go and you're no fun if you don't, I think, are over. And actually, some people actually just prefer not to, and that's totally their choice. And we should be fine with people saying, actually, that's not for me.
Not get offended, I guess.
Exactly.
Not take
Yeah.
it personally.
Not take it personally.
Yeah.
So we'll come on to some advice, and then Holly's got some advice to give too. So a bit of advice is to consider different options. So offer people different things. So it's not just one thing and that's it. Consider offering some different options for people. And in that, consider different interests. So there could be different things that people are interested in. Some people do want to go for the drinks. Some people don't. And just consider whether you can offer some different options to people, so you give people some choice. Do consider different times of day, so everything's not always in the evening, because people will have their own lives to fit in around this too. So what can you do around that? Consider different types of activities. So we've talked about some of them. It can be things like lunches and dinners, but it could be one of those experiences. It could be some budget given to team leaders to talk with their team about what they want to do. So there could be different ways in which you give people choices. So it's not just all mandate, this is it, and there's no other choices. So it's good to be able to give people some control over it and give them some choices. And do consider different budgets. So, for example, if you're organising something in central London and everyone has to get there on their own budget, not everybody's going to be able to do that. So we need to consider what people's budgets are and make sure it's inclusive and we're giving people different options. And then some good ideas that we've seen. So there's a company that we worked with who had something called Beliefs Day. So instead of saying everybody has to go to the Christmas party, they had different beliefs that they discussed, and they had different things organised. So they had like a Diwali lunch, and they did have a Christmas thing, so that they gave people a choice as to what they believed in that they could go to. That was quite a good idea that worked, and it showed their employees that the employer cared, that not everybody celebrates the same things. Consider different dietary options. A lot of social events don't consider different dietary options, and actually there's lots of different things to consider, to ask people what their dietary preferences are. Celebrate different festivals, so it doesn't, or even if your majority of your employees do celebrate the same things, it's a good way to learn about different things, to celebrate different festivals. Ask employees, definitely ask them, and make socials optional, so people don't have to go to them, so you can make them optional. So, sorry, Kelly.
I was going to say that belief days is a really quite interesting thought, really, because I think back to when I worked in sort of a large open floor office, there were probably quite a lot of colleagues on the floor that had different beliefs that I wasn't in tune with. And actually, if there were, a pizza lunch day, or after the huddle, we're going to do this or do that, and we're going to talk about that, then I think that would just open up the conversation more. So I would, I guess,
Yeah.
be able to learn a little bit more about my colleagues rather than just it being surface level, which is probably quite nice. So yeah, I quite
Yeah.
like that idea.
Yeah, the employer that we worked with who did that, they encouraged people to share different days, but also talk a bit about them, so people learned
Yeah,
about what it was as well. Yeah, so
I
it
like
worked
that.
really well. Yeah. Um, we'll come back to this one, because I think actually if we go to your slide next, Holly, we'll come back to other good ideas.
Okay. So I guess working through these, so from a HR perspective, what does good look like? Obviously, Mo's touched on quite a lot of the pitfalls and risks that you could face when hosting or funding a social event. So let's just work through these in terms of what Alice and I would think would be your go-to HR tasks when you're planning. So first, set clear expectations. So that could be in an email, that could be in a team huddle. But I really do think it's about setting, once you've done all those great things that Mo's talked about around asking options, getting people's advice, not making it optional, making sure you've made it as inclusive as you can. Once you're set on the day and the experience and the time and the funding, etc., it's about setting clear expectations around where are you going? What is the purpose? The timings, and just making sure that everybody is aware who's going. And I guess along with the setting clear expectations, there's that kind of the second point around who is sponsoring the event. So who's funding the event? And that's a really key one that Alison and I see quite a lot, is around if it's company funded and you've got some money behind a bar, or you've paid to go to a show, or you've done an activity. If that's funded, then that is very much on company time as we see it. So, the company is funding that social event. If you choose to go to it, then the expectations are that the behavior and the conduct that you would expect during that event or that social would be professional. If people then choose to go on afterwards and go to their own bar, or go back to somebody's house and have a few drinks, or whatever, then that is not sponsored by the company. And so it's sort of that kind of creating where that invisible line is, which is the third point, is just making sure that it's not blurred in any way. So I think I've seen it before where kind of people go, I'm just sticking a card behind the bar and just will keep the tab open. That's really, really, really vague, and people don't then know, obviously one, people just think, well, free drinks. So it's going to add to that risk around the drinks and alcohol consumption and what could go wrong. But also there's not that line. I not so long ago had to deal with quite a messy grievance, and it was for a company that had a social event to do with their financial year, and they flew into Miami, and they did a whole really cool meeting. They had some US employees, so had a team building day in the day, had a lunch. It was all about strategy, really, really good. The second day when they stayed over, it was a pool party. Very different feeling, and even when I was kind of thinking about this myself, would I be comfortable getting in a swimsuit in front of people? that I worked with, probably not. Then you've got alcohol involved. That wasn't particularly sponsored in terms of the company. Yes, they were there, but that was kind of the expectations was the second day is your own time to explore. So it's really just be clear on where that line is around the purpose and what you're there for, and then your own free time to go and do what you want, and kind of make sure that you explore all your options. I guess the fourth one on there is, who is your go-to person for questions? So who, I guess, whilst you're setting out your clear expectations, make sure that people are aware if they've got questions before the event, whether that's timing, whether that's if they can't go and they don't want to face that embarrassment or feel like they're going to be kind of disciplined in any way. If they've got any questions, who do they go to prior to the event around that? Is that HR, is that line manager? Just set that clear expectation. And then it's also really good to put a go-to person after the event. If there's maybe things didn't go quite to plan, or someone did get made to feel uncomfortable, or they witnessed something that they're not quite sure on, just having that safe person that's a go-to trusted person to just go to questions, I think is really clear. Just, you're not citing problems before they happen, but you're also giving people an option so that if they do arise, then you've kind of mitigated anyone sat at their desk or at home thinking, I really don't think that should have happened, or I shouldn't have seen that. So, it's just giving people an option to speak. Creating alignment with your culture. So I'm very passionate about this. I do think your work socials at whatever time of year and whatever activity or event that you choose really needs to embody your culture of your business and the values. So I guess just think about that when you're giving some options. Does that really align with the purpose and the value of the business? And is that something that you see is a true representation of your brand and your employee brand? Leadership behavior is an absolute priority. It's always really interesting, especially just from a HR perspective, is like, how long does HR hang around on these socials? People are normally waiting for the sober HR person to kind of disappear into the night. But if you've got HR that like to get involved, which is absolutely great. I mean, I think it's really clear as part of that expectation is leadership behavior is your priority. So very much stuff like this is led top down. So just be clear on what conduct and what professional expectations are there for leadership. You want people to be able to let their hair down, be able to socialize, but there is that line, and just be really clear what that line is and it's not crossed, because it's hard to discipline or rectify any issues for maybe other peers or junior members of the team if your senior leadership team have been seen doing exactly the same behavior. You'd have to then do for leadership. So it's all about fairness. So just make sure that that's in place. And then just accountability throughout is, whilst you're setting out those expectations, just make sure everybody is completely accountable for their own actions. I think when you're setting out kind of an agenda, so to speak, and you've got kind of maybe these go-to points or FAQs for the night, etc., then just making sure that everybody has that key accountability to be able to take control of their own actions, dip out when they want to, go off on once the event's ended, if they want to arrange their own event, etc., then they can. Just everybody has that same feeling. I think Alison put there as well about in the chat that, yeah, if you see something that's not professional, not in line with the behavior and the standard of conduct, etc., you need to feel empowered, I guess, to be able to call that out. So just that comes from more than just your social event, and more, it comes beyond setting the expectation. That should be through your culture of being able to call things out as you see them, and people feeling empowered to have that psychological safety, which Mo talks about quite a lot in other sessions. But it is around being able to feel safe to call things out and not feel as though, particularly maybe if it's a leader, I've seen that quite a lot. Well, he's the CEO. Who's to call him out that he was being drunk and maybe a bit blurring the lines. No, everybody has accountability, and everybody should have that freedom of speech to be able to pull people up. So